A 3-month-old baby lay crying in her ornate nursery, while her billionaire father paced the marble floors below, unable to bear the sound that reminded him so painfully of his own helplessness. Little Sophia Ashford had been born premature to parents who could afford the world's best medical care, but couldn't buy the one thing she needed most: the love of a mother who had died bringing her into the world. Marcus Ashford had tried everything money could purchase: night nurses, pediatric specialists, the finest formula imported from Switzerland, but nothing could soothe his daughter's endless crying or fill the void left by Elena's death during childbirth. Today, however, would mark the beginning of a transformation that no amount of wealth could have predicted, because today Grace Williams arrived at the Ashford mansion, carrying with her 40 years of experience raising children and a heart still heavy with her own recent loss: the death of her grandson in a car accident just 2 months earlier. Grace stood outside the imposing iron gates of the Ashford estate, clutching her worn leather purse and studying the mansion that would be her workplace for the foreseeable future. At 58 years old, she had worked as a domestic for wealthy families throughout her adult life, but she had never encountered a household quite like this one. A place where tragedy hung in the air like expensive perfume, where a motherless baby cried day and night while her father retreated into work and grief. The employment agency had warned Grace that this would be a challenging assignment. The father is difficult since his wife's death. The baby has been through 6 nannies in 3 months. They all quit because she won't stop crying, and Mr. Ashford won't allow them to make any real changes to help her. The butler who admitted Grace to the mansion, an elderly British man named Charles, looked exhausted as he led her through rooms that belonged to museums rather than homes where children should play and grow. "Miss Williams," he said quietly as they climbed the grand staircase toward the nursery, "I must warn you that baby Sophia is challenging. She cries almost constantly, sleeps very little, and Mr. Ashford has become quite protective of her routine. The previous nannies tried everything: different formulas, sleep schedules, specialists, but nothing seemed to help." His words carried the weariness of someone who had watched a household spiral into dysfunction while being powerless to intervene. As they approached the nursery, Grace could hear Sophia's cries echoing through the hallway. Not the healthy wails of a baby demanding attention, but the exhausted, desperate sobbing of an infant who had given up hope of being truly comforted. The sound hit Grace like a physical blow, awakening memories of her own grandson Jamal, who had been just 6 months old when the accident took him away forever. She had been his primary caregiver while his mother worked 2 jobs, and the silence that followed his death had been more devastating than any noise could be. "That baby sounds like she's grieving," Grace said softly, and Charles nodded with surprise at her perceptive observation. The nursery itself was a monument to expensive good intentions: designer furniture, imported toys, every possible convenience that money could buy, but felt cold and sterile, lacking the warmth and love that babies need more than luxury. Sophia lay in her elaborate crib, her tiny fists clenched as she cried with the exhausted persistence of someone who had learned that comfort might not come even when she called for it. The night nurse, a stern woman in her 40s, looked up with relief when Grace entered. "Thank goodness you're here," she said with obvious frustration. "I've tried everything: feeding, changing, rocking, singing, but she just won't settle. Mr. Ashford is downstairs in his office with his hands over his ears, and honestly, I don't blame him." Grace approached the crib slowly, her trained eyes taking in details that revealed more about Sophia's condition than expensive medical consultations had discovered. The baby's cry changed slightly when Grace came near, not stopping, but shifting from desperation to something that might have been hope. "Hello, little angel," Grace said softly, her voice carrying the warmth that had soothed dozens of children over the years. "You've been having a hard time, haven't you? Missing your mama, feeling scared and alone in this big house with all these strangers." As she spoke, Grace gently placed her hand on Sophia's chest, not picking her up immediately, but simply offering the comfort of human touch and understanding presence that the baby had been craving. The transformation began gradually, so subtly that the night nurse almost missed it. Sophia's cries became less frantic, her breathing more regular, her tiny body relaxing under Grace's gentle touch. "How are you doing that?" the nurse asked with amazement. "I've been here for 12 hours, and she hasn't stopped crying for more than 10 minutes at a time." Grace smiled sadly, thinking of Jamal and all the children she had cared for over the years. "Babies know when someone understands their pain," she said simply. "This little one isn't just hungry or tired. She's mourning." She spent 9 months hearing her mother's heartbeat, feeling her mother's movements, and then suddenly all of that was gone. She doesn't need more medicine or special formula. She needs someone who recognizes that her grief is real. Grace's approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of trying to stop Sophia's crying, she acknowledged it, validated it, and gradually began to fill the emotional void that no amount of expensive care had been able to address. She picked up Sophia carefully, holding her against her chest where the baby could hear her heartbeat, and began humming a lullaby in the rich, warm voice that had comforted generations of children. "There, baby girl," Grace murmured. "Cry as much as you need to. Mama Grace is here, and I'm not going anywhere. I lost someone precious too, so I know how much it hurts when the world feels too big and too empty." The change in Sophia was remarkable. Not immediate silence, but a gradual shift from desperate sobbing to the quieter crying of a child who felt heard and understood. Grace continued talking to her, explaining what she was doing as she changed her diaper, prepared her bottle, and arranged her blankets with the practiced efficiency of someone who had raised 4 children of her own while caring for countless others in her professional life. "Your daddy is hurting too," Grace told Sophia as she settled into the rocking chair with the baby in her arms. "He loves you so much, but he doesn't know how to help because his heart is broken just like yours. Maybe we can help each other figure out how to heal." Downstairs, Marcus Ashford was trying to concentrate on quarterly reports when he realized something unprecedented had happened. The crying had stopped. Not just diminished or temporarily paused, but actually stopped for the first time in weeks. His first instinct was panic. In his traumatized state, silence meant something terrible had happened. He bounded up the stairs 2 at a time, his heart racing with fear that he was about to face another devastating loss. But when he reached the nursery doorway, he found a scene that stopped him in his tracks. Grace sitting in the rocking chair with Sophia peaceful in her arms. Both of them bathed in soft lamplight while Grace sang quietly in a voice that seemed to carry decades of love and loss and wisdom. "Is she?" Marcus whispered, afraid to speak too loudly and break whatever spell had finally brought peace to his tormented daughter. Grace looked up with a gentle smile that reminded him powerfully of his own mother, who had died when he was 12 and left a void that wealth had never been able to fill. "She's sleeping," Grace said softly. Really sleeping, not just exhausted unconsciousness. She needed to know that someone understood her sadness, that it was okay to miss her mama, and that she would be loved and protected while she learns how to live in this world without her. The explanation was so simple and profound that Marcus felt tears gathering in his eyes for the first time since Elena's funeral, when he had decided that showing emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford while his daughter needed him to be strong. Over the following days, Grace's presence transformed not just Sophia's daily routine, but the entire atmosphere of the Ashford mansion, bringing warmth and life to spaces that had felt like mausoleums since Elena's death. She established rhythms that honored both Sophia's needs and Marcus's grief, creating pockets of peace in a household that had known only chaos and sorrow for months. Grace would arrive each morning at 6, spending her first hour simply holding Sophia and talking to her about the day ahead, explaining each activity as if the baby could understand every word. "Good morning, sweet girl," she would say, lifting Sophia from her crib. "It's Tuesday, and the sun is shining through your window. We're going to have breakfast together, then maybe take a walk in the garden so you can hear the birds singing." The breakfast routine became a meditation and mindfulness as Grace prepared Sophia's bottle while narrating her actions. "Now we're warming your milk to just the right temperature, not too hot and not too cold, because Mama Grace knows exactly how you like it." She would test the formula on her wrist, adjust the temperature, and settle into the feeding with the patience of someone who understood that rushing only created anxiety for babies who were already struggling with the trauma of loss. During these quiet moments, Marcus would sometimes appear in the doorway, drawn by the sound of Grace's voice and the unprecedented sight of his daughter calm and content in someone's arms. "Mr. Ashford," Grace said one morning, noticing him hovering in the hallway, "would you like to give Sophia her bottle? I could show you how she likes to be held." The invitation was offered without pressure or judgment, but Marcus's response revealed the depth of his fear and self-doubt. "I don't think," she cries whenever I hold her. "I must remind her too much of what happened, of what she lost because of me." The self-blame in his voice broke Grace's heart, reminding her of her own daughter after Jamal's accident, convinced that she should have been able to prevent the tragedy that changed everything. "May I tell you something?" Grace asked gently. "Babies don't blame their parents for things beyond anyone's control. Sophia cries when you hold her because she can feel your pain, your fear, your guilt. Children are like little sponges. They absorb the emotions around them." Grace's explanation continued with the wisdom that comes from decades of observing how families heal from trauma. When you hold her while feeling guilty about her mama's death, she senses that guilt and it makes her anxious. But if you could hold her while feeling grateful that she's alive, while celebrating the miracle that she survived when the doctor said she might not, she would feel that gratitude too. The insight was revolutionary for Marcus, who had been so focused on his failures that he had forgotten to acknowledge his daughter's remarkable strength in surviving a birth that had claimed her mother's life. "She's a fighter," Grace continued, looking down at Sophia with obvious love. "She got that from both her parents, your determination and her mama's grace under pressure." The breakthrough came later that week, when Marcus finally accepted Grace's invitation to feed Sophia. Approaching the task with the same careful attention he brought to business negotiations that could make or break companies. Grace positioned his arms correctly, showed him how to support Sophia's head, and guided the bottle to the right angle while speaking in the soothing tone that had become Sophia's favorite sound. "There you go," Grace encouraged as Sophia began drinking without fussing. "See how she's looking at you? She knows you're her daddy, and she loves you just as much as you love her." Marcus stared down at his daughter with wonder, seeing for the first time not just a reminder of Elena's death, but a living testament to their love, a future that could honor the past while moving forward into something new and beautiful. The healing process accelerated as Grace introduced Marcus to the daily rhythms of infant care, teaching him not just practical skills, but emotional approaches that transformed caretaking from burden into bond-building opportunity. She showed him how to read Sophia's different cries, hunger versus tiredness versus the need for comfort, and gradually Marcus began to distinguish between sounds that had previously seemed like indecipherable distress. "This cry means she's getting sleepy," Grace explained during one of their afternoon lessons, "and this one means she wants to be moved to a different position." Once you learn her language, taking care of her becomes like having a conversation. Grace's methods were grounded in the belief that babies thrive on consistency, predictability, and emotional attunement rather than expensive equipment or rigid schedules imposed by adults who don't understand infant development. She created routines that worked with Sophia's natural rhythms, feeding times that followed her hunger cues rather than clock schedules, play periods that stimulated her developing senses without overwhelming her, and sleep rituals that helped her feel safe and secure in a world that had initially seemed hostile and unpredictable. "Babies don't need fancy toys," Grace told Marcus as she helped Sophia reach for a simple rattle. "They need responsive adults who pay attention to their signals and respond with love and patience." The most profound change came when Grace suggested that Marcus talk to Sophia about Elena, sharing memories and feelings that he had been trying to suppress in a misguided attempt to protect both himself and his daughter from additional pain. "She needs to know about her mama," Grace said gently. "Not the sadness of losing her, but the joy of having had her love. Tell her about Elena's laugh, about how excited she was when she felt Sophia moving in her belly, about all the dreams she had for her daughter's future." The suggestion initially seemed impossible to Marcus, who had avoided mentioning Elena's name for months. But Grace's encouragement gave him permission to honor his wife's memory as part of Sophia's story rather than something that needed to be hidden or forgotten. "Your mama had the most beautiful voice," Marcus told Sophia one evening, his voice shaky but determined as Grace listened from the doorway. "She used to sing to you before you were born, and she would put her hands on her belly so you could feel her love through her touch. She wanted you so much, princess. She would have been the most amazing mother, and she would have loved watching you grow and discover the world." As he spoke, Sophia gazed up at him with the focused attention that babies give to voices they recognize as important, and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Not the painful breaking that had defined his grief, but the beginning of healing that allows love to flow alongside loss. Grace watched this interaction with tears in her eyes, remembering similar conversations she had encouraged between parents and children in other families where tragedy had created barriers to connection. "You're giving her the greatest gift," she told Marcus when he finished. "You're teaching her that love doesn't end with death, that her mama will always be part of her story even though she can't be physically present. That's something that will comfort her throughout her whole life." The wisdom in Grace's words reflected not just professional experience, but personal understanding. She had learned through losing Jamal that grief shared becomes more bearable, while grief suppressed becomes toxic to everyone it touches. 3 months into Grace's employment, the Ashford household had been transformed from a place of silent suffering into something resembling a home where healing was possible and joy could coexist with remembered sorrow. Sophia had developed into a thriving, alert baby who smiled readily, slept peacefully, and gazed at her father with obvious love and trust. Marcus had learned to care for his daughter with competence and confidence, understanding her needs and responding to them with the attentiveness that Grace had modeled from her first day. But perhaps most importantly, both father and daughter had learned that loving Sophia didn't require forgetting Elena, that honoring the past could enhance rather than diminish their ability to build a future together. The morning routine had become a cherished ritual for Marcus, who now woke early not to escape to his office, but to spend time with Sophia before the day's responsibilities claimed his attention. Grace would arrive to find them already awake, Marcus holding his daughter while describing the view from her window or reading business news in the animated voice that made even stock reports sound like bedtime stories. "Good morning, Miss Grace," Marcus would say, his transformation evident in the ease with which he now handled his daughter and the genuine smile that had replaced the haunted expression he had worn for months. "Sophia and I were just discussing the quarterly projections. Weren't we, princess?" Grace's role had evolved from emergency intervention to trusted advisor, someone Marcus consulted not just about Sophia's care, but about his own journey through grief and single parenthood. Their conversations during Sophia's nap times had become opportunities for Marcus to process emotions he had been suppressing, to ask questions about child development that wealthy men weren't supposed to need help with, and to receive the kind of wisdom that no expensive consultant could provide. "How do I make sure she knows how much Elena wanted her?" Marcus asked one afternoon. "How do I help her understand that her mama's death wasn't her fault, that she was the most wanted, most loved baby in the world?" Grace's response reflected the deep understanding that comes from years of helping families navigate complex emotional terrain. "You do exactly what you've been doing. You tell her stories about Elena's love. You show her pictures. You celebrate Elena's birthday and their shared birthday as special days when you remember how lucky you all were to have each other, even if it wasn't for as long as you hoped." She paused, watching Sophia sleep peacefully in her crib, then continued. "And you love her so completely and consistently that she never doubts her worth, never questions whether she deserves happiness, never feels responsible for tragedies that were beyond anyone's control." The most emotional moment in their relationship came when Marcus asked Grace to stay permanently, not just as Sophia's caregiver, but as part of their family in whatever capacity felt comfortable to her. "You saved us," he said simply, his voice thick with gratitude that went far beyond professional appreciation. "Not just Sophia, but me too. I was drowning in grief and guilt, and I couldn't see how to be the father she needed. You didn't just teach me how to take care of her. You taught me how to love her without being afraid of the love, how to honor Elena's memory while building our future. The offer included not just increased salary, but genuine partnership in decisions about Sophia's upbringing, recognition that Grace's wisdom and experience were invaluable resources that couldn't be replaced or replicated. Grace's acceptance was immediate and heartfelt, though she insisted on maintaining some professional boundaries that would allow her to continue being effective in her role, while acknowledging the deep personal connection that had developed between all three of them. This little girl has been healing my heart just as much as I've been helping heal yours, she told Marcus. Losing Jamal left such a hole in my life, such a silence where his laughter used to be. Caring for Sophia, watching her grow and thrive, seeing you become the daddy she needs, it's given me purpose again, reminded me that love doesn't end with loss, it just finds new ways to express itself. 1 year later, the Ashford mansion buzzed with preparation for Sophia's first birthday. Not a somber anniversary of loss, but a joyful celebration of life, love, and the family that had been rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. Grace moved through the house with the authority of someone whose position had evolved far beyond that of an employee. She was now the heart of a household where Marcus served as devoted father and successful businessman, while she provided the emotional wisdom and practical knowledge that kept their unconventional family functioning beautifully. Sophia had grown into a delightful toddler who called Grace Nana, and reached for her father with complete trust, secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally by the two adults who had chosen to center their lives around her well-being. The birthday celebration itself was a testament to how completely their lives had been transformed, with guests including not just Marcus's business associates, but Grace's family members, friends from their neighborhood, and other families whose children had benefited from Grace's wisdom over the years. Sophia moved through the party with the confidence of a child who had never doubted her welcome in the world, charming adults and playing with other children, while Marcus and Grace watched with the proud satisfaction of parents who had successfully guided her through her first year of life. "Look at her," Marcus said to Grace as they watched Sophia attempt to blow out her birthday candle. "She's everything Elena dreamed she would be, strong, joyful, surrounded by love." The most touching moment came when Marcus presented Grace with a gift that formalized what everyone already understood about her place in their family: adoption papers that would make her Sophia's legal grandmother, ensuring that their relationship would be protected by law as well as love. "You've been her grandmother in every way that matters since the day you arrived," Marcus said, his voice emotional as he explained his reasoning. "I want to make sure that if anything ever happens to me, she'll always have you, and you'll always have the legal standing to make decisions about her care and future." The gesture represented not just practical planning, but profound recognition of Grace's irreplaceable role in Sophia's life. Acknowledgement that family is created by choice and commitment rather than just biological connection. Grace's response to the adoption papers revealed the depth of her own transformation over the past year. The way that caring for Sophia had helped her process her grief over Jamal, while creating new sources of meaning and joy in her life. "This little girl saved me just as much as I helped save her," Grace said, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the legal documents that would formalize their bond. "When I lost Jamal, I thought my time as a grandmother was over forever, that I would never again have a child to spoil and love and watch grow up. Sophia gave me that gift back, and you trusted me enough to share her with me. I couldn't ask for anything more precious than that." The evening ended with their new family tradition: Marcus reading Sophia a bedtime story while Grace prepared her bottle, then all three of them settling into the rocking chair that had become the center of their nightly ritual. Sophia would drink her milk while listening to Grace lullabies, then drift off to sleep in her father's arms, while both adults marveled at the miracle of her existence and their unlikely but perfect family unit. "Sweet dreams, princess," Marcus would whisper as he placed her in her crib. "Mama Elena is watching over you, and Daddy and Nana Grace will be here when you wake up, just like always." As Grace and Marcus left the nursery together, they often paused to look back at Sophia, sleeping peacefully, both of them understanding that they had created something extraordinary from circumstances that had initially seemed impossible to survive. The motherless baby who had cried inconsolably for months was now a secure, happy toddler who brought joy to everyone around her. The grief-stricken father who had been paralyzed by guilt and fear had become a confident, loving parent who honored his wife's memory while building a beautiful future for their daughter. And the woman who had arrived as a temporary solution to a childcare crisis had become the cornerstone of a family that proved love could triumph over loss, that healing was possible even from the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the most profound connections form between people who desperately needed each other without knowing it. The transformation was complete, but it was also ongoing, each day bringing new opportunities for growth, new challenges to navigate together, and new reminders that the most important things in life cannot be bought, only cultivated through patience, wisdom, and the courage to remain open to love even after experiencing devastating loss. If this story moved you, maybe it's the sign you needed today. If it is, subscribe. The millionaire who thought money could solve every problem had discovered that some things, healing, love, hope, could only be provided by someone who understood that babies need hearts more than bank accounts, that grief shared becomes manageable, and that sometimes the most valuable employees become family members whose worth cannot be measured in salary, but only in the immeasurable gift of unconditional love and unwavering commitment to nurturing life in all its fragile, precious beauty.